where in a few hours from now, Donald Trump will take oath as the 47th President of the United States of America. But what does this mean for the US, for the world, for China, and for India in particular? To carry forward this discussion, I have with me our consulting editor, Swasti Rao, joining us. Swasti, you know, the first question now, Trump is going to take oath, right? And this is supposed to be a big moment. And, personally, I feel that this is going to have ripple effects on multiple things of,
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
know, economy wise, social wise, politics across the world.
Yeah.
In your sense, how do you see Trump 2.0?
Well, so Snehesh, first the thing is that we have to really acknowledge the fact that Trump's coming back to the White House has been nothing short of spectacular. Okay, I would say over dramatized in many ways. If you go by his recent statements, the way he has kept his arch rivals as well as his allies completely destabilized by giving a statement and then contradicting it and then giving another statement. But I think this also means that America's the Pax Americana, even though it is in relative decline, still calls the shots, globally. So Trump coming back to the White House is going to have a ripple effect, as you rightly said, over an intersectional, I would say, variety of things. So, right from Indo Pacific, India, of course, as well as to the Russia Ukraine war, to the situation in the Middle East, to China, to America itself,
Yeah.
right? To Canada America ties, okay, to so many, the whole of US Europe ties, the transatlantic relations. We expect a kind of a change, though I have argued that the geopolitical system that he's inheriting this time is also very different from what he inherited when he was president
Yeah.
the first time. But even then, don't expect anything less dramatic from Donald Trump because he's capable of pulling that off. But we will have to see what kind of rabbit he kind of
Pulls out of
pulls
his.
out of his hat.
That's, but you mentioned that we can expect something dramatic. It's the next 4 years
Yes.
are going to be dramatic 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, many in India are celebrating Trump's victory.
Yeah.
The way, the kind of media coverage that is there,
Yeah.
about his oath taking, it feels as if Trump is not going to be the president of the US, but he's going to be the president of
President of
India.
India.
But initially Trump and India, Modi, Prime Minister Modi were supposed to have, are meant to have good relations, right? He's spoken about in the past.
Yeah.
But when it came to this oath taking ceremony, his inauguration, surprisingly, he invited President Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
And there was no invitation to the Indian side.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the MEA went out, tried to get that thing, and finally now External Affairs
Jaishankar.
Minister Jaishankar is going to attend the oath taking ceremony.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Why this change? Is there some sort of tension between the two sides?
No, I don't think this has got to do with tension particularly. I think this is Trump playing his own balancing act, in many ways, because like I said, that even though if you look at his cabinet, he has put all China hawks, whether
Yeah.
it's the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, or the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. I mean, all of these people are known to have very, very strong stance on China and they are China hawks. But then he also has somebody like Elon Musk. And you know that Elon Musk has always cozied up to China, particularly for the commercial attractiveness that China offers. So I think, and in recent years, I mean, if you see, although we do expect that over a period of time, he's going to continue with his larger orientation in the Indo-Pacific, where he's, going to be balancing the rise of China and the destabilizing rise of China. But this is a part of, I think, a classic Trumpian, I would say, trolling. I mean, I have called that. This is the era of Trumpian trolling, even though Israel is such a close ally. But then just days before his oath taking, he releases a video with Jeffrey Sachs, where Jeffrey Sachs has gone on record calling all sorts of names to
Yeah.
Benjamin Netanyahu. Similarly, and so on and so forth. So I think, in my opinion, coming back to India, we should circle it back to India and come to China later. I think the broad engagement is definitely going to continue, and there's going to be broad convergence. Whether it's Trump or whether it's Elon Musk, whether, I mean, whoever you pick, I think when it comes to India, there there is bipartisan consensus. But despite that, I think this is something, Snehesh, that we've been trying to do for a long time, that we have to be very realistic. Under Trump, India will get less room to maneuver, especially its multi-alignment. If you
Absolutely.
remember what Trump has said about de-dollarization and
Yeah.
what he has said about the BRICS currency, it's not that the BRICS currency was ever on the table from India's side. Dr. Jaishankar,
India has always been opposed to it.
yeah,
India has never supported
it
it.
was never really supported it. But then the fact that Trump has called India a tariff king repeatedly, and if you see how then ultimately Prime Minister Modi was not invited, whereas one would have expected that Prime Minister Modi would be invited. Now we know that Dr. Jaishankar is going to attend it. So I think these small little hiccups. Notwithstanding the larger convergence, whether it's on defense deals, whether it's on, we will be, of course, forced to buy some hydrocarbons from America again, because he made us buy about 7 billion worth of hydrocarbons during his first term. So we are going to see a bit of concessions that we will have to give to the US. The controversy on H-1B visa,
Yeah.
etc. But despite that, I think if we can manage the hiccups in the short term, the broader convergence is going to continue in the long term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting is that you mentioned that this is his way of trolling. I'm not really sure he's trolling,
Well,
but
calling Canada the 51st state and
yes,
referring constantly to Trudeau as Governor Trudeau. I mean, no serious strategic political figure who would dare
exactly.
do something like that
But
except for
that's
Trump.
Trump,
That's
that
Trump. That's
Trumpism.
what.
But
Yeah.
interesting is that during the entire campaign, Trump had a very hardline approach when it came to China,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody expected Trump to start off by imposing high tariff on the Chinese goods.
Hmm.
But surprising is the fact that come back to the fact that he invited President Xi
Yeah.
Jinping. Of course,
Yeah.
President Xi Jinping is not going; he's sending his vice president.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he also surprisingly made a phone call
Hmm.
to President Xi Jinping on Friday, in which he mentioned that he had a good conversations, and the conversations span from trade to TikTok also.
Yeah.
So what is really happening there? So you had a Trump who was very anti-China, as you
Hmm.
mentioned.
Yeah.
You put in people who are hawkish when it comes to China
Right.
in his cabinet, but then he's doing this also at the same time. What is really happening there?
So, I mean, without trying to put myself as somebody that can actually tell what is going to happen in the future, I think we are all somewhere here speculating. In my understanding and reading, I think the broader divergence from China, and especially when it comes to the trade wars, will continue. But despite that, I want to sort of reiterate and underscore the fact that you have somebody like Elon Musk. And again, he's also a part of the department
Yeah,
on,
the
the Dodge department, of course. So, what I'm saying is, in my opinion, the best reading that I can do right now is that he is keeping his rivals as well as his allies destabilized by giving these mixed signals. I do not expect him to make a U turn. On China, especially when it comes to the larger geopolitical rivalry and competition. When you look at how he has chosen these people that are going to be ultimately putting the policy in place, they are all China hawks. But like I said, I think this has become the underlying feature of the Trump 2.0, that he is just not letting anybody stabilize and guess what Trump is going to be up to. And finally, I think, Snehesh, this is also going to create a lot of expectation on Trump, because see, if you look his entire presidential campaign,
yeah.
he seems to have made so many of these promises, and these really, I would say, outlandish promises, and he would really have a lot of difficulty actually keeping them, because I don't see him ending the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. If you now see his, lot of
Yeah,
the political commentators
yeah,
around him have started also to sort of confirm that yes, there is no such plan. Similarly, I don't see that he's going to come and just end the war in the Middle East, because that, of course, will also take its own time, and then Trump might also double down on that. When it comes to Taiwan, one cannot expect that he's going to just support Taiwan and the Taiwanese military modernization, because end of the day, if you remember, he said that why should we do that if Taiwanese are not
yeah.
doing it? Similarly, in Europe, so I mean, the main point that I wish to say is that this does seem a little out of sync, but I do not see a U-turn. And we will have to basically wait and see if there are any policy shifts. I mean, so far I have not seen any.
True. Another interesting aspect is the fact that Trump you mentioned about the Russia-Ukraine war, and
Yeah.
Trump has said, his recent statement, he said that he's going to end the wars, and he referred to, the Israel conflict, which is there,
Yeah.
which is almost more or less
Yeah, there's been a
settled, the
ceasefire.
ceasefire, which is
Yes.
there,
Yeah.
in which Trump also played a very critical role. Then he talks about the Russia-Ukraine war, and then he also talks about the prevention of the World War III also,
Yeah.
which is in reference to, of course, to do with China
Taiwan
and
Straits.
Taiwan,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part of it. So, I'm still not able to understand Trump. You have a
Yes.
hawkish guy, who you would assume that is going to take a very hawkish position when it comes to China. But then he's also coming out with these statements saying
Yeah.
that. So he's someone who believes in having their own sphere of influence. So he's not averse to China having its own sphere of influence. He's not averse to
Russia
Russia having
having
its
its.
own sphere of
Yeah.
influence. So where does it leave the US? US has always been known as, the leader of the free world.
Well, I don't think that Trump really buys this argument too much that the US has to be the leader of the free world. I think for him, the US has to be making money, and the American military industrial complex has to make money. He has to make America great again, and he has to put America first. That's the rhetoric.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into the details of the rhetoric, you understand that okay, if you want to do that, if the military industrial complex is actually churning out all that money for Americans, he has an incentive to carry on with these wars. But despite that, I would say that I think your reading of Trump is correct, and I would say that yes, it's not. And I think he really makes sure that people are not able to understand him. I think it
Yeah.
gives him an element of
It gi-
surprise, and it also gives him that element. Like I have argued in one of my columns that actually he keeps everybody destabilized and vulnerable, so that at the time of the negotiation, he can walk away with the best possible deal. I think this is one of his psychological tricks, because he always positions himself as this alpha male deal maker. And
yeah.
one of the ways is that you keep the other side so nervous and destabilized and unsure of what you really want, is that whatever then is can be taken away from it and can be shown as a deal to the world. So I think Trump is also playing these psychological tactics. But once he's in power, I mean, after a few hours, frankly, I expect him to focus more of his attention on the executive orders inside the United States, and actually then we will see the reality behind the rhetoric of ending all the wars in the world and doing all of that. But I think that reading is correct, Snehesh, that Trump actually is a pragmatist, right? One of the ways, in fact, he's actually gone on record saying that because of the Russia-Ukraine war, there is too much of strategic deepening between Russia and China. And how do
Yeah.
you prevent that? So one
Yeah.
of the ways in which you prevent that is that you also engage, right? So I think we will have to wait and watch. But my first guess would be that he is going to turn inwards. We are looking at all these famous executive orders that he has announced that he is going to bring out one after the other. So I would be sort of focused more there. I don't think he would have the bandwidth, at least in the first couple of weeks, months, to really look at all these wars. But I'm sure there are people there who would be doing the work.
The Wall Street Journal had come out with a report mentioning that, speaking to Trump team members, insiders, who has told the Wall Street Journal that Trump is looking at a early visit to China and to India,
Yeah.
right? Somewhere in April
Yeah.
is somewhere where we all will get busy if that
Yes.
happens. Uh, so China we've covered, but I want to come back to the main thing. What does it mean for India?
India. Yeah.
As you rightly mentioned, Trump has called India
Tariff king.
the tariff king, right?
Yeah.
So where does India really stand in the whole thing? Under Biden, you had a growth in relationship,
Yeah.
you know,
True.
and it was a sustained growth. Contrary to what people would think and assume, if you go deeper into it, there isn't a sustained growth in strategic field, in the defense field. Under Trump, what do you expect?
Under Trump, I expect the same, but I expect the relationship to become more transactional. Because see, we have in 2023-2024 financial year, the total trade between India and US stood at around $118 billion, and out of which about 37-38 billion was India's surplus. Okay, and if you look at the rate at which this has grown, I mean, from India's side, it's been a steady growth of about 10% almost every year. If you take like the last 20 years data. So Trump is saying that you have to also open your markets because you have to lower your tariffs. India has been asking for tariff reduction when it wants to export,
Yeah.
but just the other way around when it imports. And I think that is also very important because the other two large trade partners that India has, especially China and Russia, we are running trade deficits with both. I mean,
Yeah.
with China, of course, it's well known why. Whoever is doing a trade with China runs a trade deficit with China. With Russia, it's because of the huge quantities of Russian oil.
Yeah.
So we also need to somewhere balance that, and the trade surplus that we have with the US, with the EU, with UK. I mean, those relationships. And if you carefully see, these are the countries with whom we are also trying to push for better trade. So very quickly on trade, I see that Indian side will make some concessions. Those concessions might be lowering of tariffs, yes, or but then lowering of tariffs would also mean risking a lot of dumping, okay, from the Chinese side. So, but that would be one. The concessions could also come in the form of, like I said, buying more hydrocarbons from the US. So that's on the trade part. On the other part, it's Trump's coming, and all this controversy around H-1B visa
Yeah.
is something we all know
And also
how.
illegal immigrants also. That's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
something which is
Come
there.
on. If you look at the data which is shared by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the 2023-24 data actually shows that Indians, and they have about what 2 or 3 thousand of Indians, which are the fourth largest groups that are already in the detention centers that
Exactly.
have to go back. And similarly, if you go by the details of those that annual report, it's about 18,000 Indians that have been
Exactly.
identified as people that have to be sent back. So those kind of things are extremely crucial, and in fact these are reasons why you would always see these themes repeating every time Dr. Jaishankar goes there, or the NSA travels, or somebody comes from there. So I think we will have to see how that impacts, how is that fitting in the larger construct of a Make America Great Again. Because if there are critics to H-1B, then there are also supporters that say that,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you then look at the kind of high value skilled labor that has brought into the US, through this visa. So that would be that. In defense, yes, I also see a kind of a upward trajectory, because if you see how that has developed, especially in the last decade, it's been nothing short of spectacular again. And from India's side, I could also see some concessions being made there in order to balance the overall relationship under Trump, because Trump is going to be less, I would say, conducive to India's multi-alignment, and he has gone on record saying that.
Absolutely. And India has always focused on this key word that it uses, Jaishankar uses, strategic autonomy.
Yeah,
And
strategic
yeah,
autonomy.
strategic
Correct,
autonomy.
correct.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned that India is going to have less maneuvering space.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons, Nehesh, and I think we should be discussing that a lot more. That even though Biden administration was always, in terms of communication, the
Yeah.
strategic communication that Indian governments have had with Democrat governments have always been complicated, because their endorsement of all the human rights and this and that,
Yeah.
and all the nonsensical reports that America loves, taking out, special, and it's basically directed to their lobbies. Actually,
Yeah.
nobody takes it
Yeah.
seriously. But with the Republican governments, we have had more, I would say, easier, smoother communication. So I think there is this big, at least perception in India, that with Donald Trump coming in, everything is going to be hunky dory and smooth. But actually, Donald Trump's coming would also entail certain costs on India, and one of those could be
Absolutely.
on strategic autonomy.
Absolutely. For example, when it comes to even, defense issues, I've been speaking to multiple people, and
Yeah.
including, representatives of other countries also,
Hmm.
diplomats and all. And everybody is keen to understand what the push and pull that Trump will be able to pull off when it comes to key defense deals, right? For example, you have the MMRCA contract, which is up for grabs. The French are leading it, are likely to win the contract in a normal way.
Yeah.
But then you have Trump now, who's going
Yeah.
to push for both Lockheed and Boeing, who are interested in bagging this contract.
Yeah.
I don't know if Trump was there. I don't know if the Rafale Marine contract would have actually gone through so smoothly. When it was competing against Boeing. So, in your sense, do you see it's going to be a lot of transaction? There's going to be a lot of give and take when it comes to Trump, India,
Yeah.
US ties?
Well, I mean, the
And would
first.
India have to give a lot? Would India have to give a lot to actually take in some?
Well, I mean, very quickly, and this is just for making people understand this in a smoother way, which is that, see, the way these companies invest, when you look at the American companies, right, they have their own way. I mean, it's not the American government that sort of invests; it's the American private companies that invest. And when it comes to India, of course, there are problems with how our regulatory bottlenecks
Yeah.
are, etc., etc. And then we also want, because of the DAP 2020, we would also want more transfer of technology, and we would want more jobs to be created in India. But then you have one thing called Make in India that India is prioritizing, and then you have Make in America or Make
Exactly.
America Great Again, which Trump is prioritizing.
Yeah.
So obviously, these two things do seem, or these two aspirations do seem counterintuitive. They are not going to be easy to reconcile. But like I said, that the broader convergence in Indo-Pacific, for example, the Quad framework, etc., and we'll come to the defense deals also. I think that is going to continue very quickly. I think the first concession, if we can call that, perhaps could be the strikers deal, which is a very hotly debated issue in India, because we have indigenous players like the Tatas who've made the Crystal, but at the same time, there are always talks that the government might actually finalize the strikers, etc.
But that is something which is already on between the two
Yeah, it's
NSAs. They've
already on.
agreed
Yeah,
on, contrary to
yeah,
what many people
yeah,
would
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, so I mean, just to add to that, I think when it comes to the defense deals, as far as the French are concerned, I think they still have a very preeminent position. And that's not only got to do with
imagine
reliability and
the
trust.
Americans pulled off the submarine deal under the French feet
AUKUS,
when it came to Australia.
yes.
So French are very
Oh my God.
wary of the
Yeah,
Americans there.
very wary of the Americans. But I think when it comes to the French side, basically the thing is not just to do with reliability and trust. It's also got to do with economies of scale, because we are using so many French platforms. It just makes more sense to sort of invest in those platforms. Whereas for America, we of course there is so much talk of the GE
Yeah.
404 and the GE 414. Let the 404 come first, and then we come to 414. But despite that, I think I would be interested in seeing what is Trump's position on, for example, the complex semiconductor fabrication agreement, which
Yeah.
was signed under ISET. How serious is he about the Indus X innovation? All of that. The SOSA, so many frameworks have been put, and I think Trump's attitude towards India will become apparent as we see more progress, down the line. And let's expect a lot of high-profile visits to and fro. By the way, Prime Minister Modi is going to France in February
Yeah.
for the AI summit. Donald Trump has been invited there. I'm not sure if he's going to come or not, but I think he will come, because that's also a way
Yeah.
of rapprochement, with the French. That would give, one window for them to meet. Similarly, Poland is going to be hosting the Three Seas summit later in the year. I think sometime April, if I'm not wrong, or maybe later. And then again, I'm sure Donald Trump is going to be invited. So we will see a lot of these opportunities where the leaders meet, and we will get a sense of what really that transactionalism plays out
Yeah.
as time goes by.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Swasti, for taking us through what one can expect. I think the key takeaway from here is that one will really have to wait and watch,
Yeah, I think
because
patience is key. Yes.
patience is key.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to Trump,
Yeah.
I'm not sure many of the time whether he actually knows what he's doing, right? But jokes apart,
Yeah.
I think it's a wait and watch approach.
Yeah.
A lot is going to change. His taking over will have huge impact, not just on the US policies, but also on the world at large. So, but thank you once again, Swasti, for joining us here at The Print.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.